to start with an interview. I invite General Director of GSMA, Max. You're welcome to the stage. And President and CEO of MTS, Vyacheslav Nikolayev. So traditionally on TV, I do it 35 minutes an interview. It's a standard format. You have time to talk about something. We have only 20 minutes, a big number of questions. We divide it into blocks. Let's start with ecosystems. We in the country have an idea, an obsession building up a global ecosystem. So that's quite a trend. Max, let's start with you. Just to get your brains as to, remembering that we have only 20 minutes to go. Do you have any successful examples of building up ecosystems inside telecoms, or maybe even wider, covering financial sectors and other sectors?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? No, we cannot hear me.
Можем мы немножко прибавить звука Матса, потому что меня слышно гораздо лучше.
Well, let's make the sound of Max better, because we can hear him.
Oh,
Good, cool.
that's better. So, well, thank you. And first, I would like to just echo what John said, that it is absolutely fantastic to be back live, to see each and every one of us. Can you imagine, we have been offline or very much virtual for a year and a half or almost 2 years. It's amazing. But now we're back. So the ecosystem players. Now, I think there are quite a few good examples, and there are quite few examples where operators have decided not to be part of having a wider portfolio. You could see what's happening in the US with Verizon divesting its media assets. You can see what's happening with AT&T, their mega acquisition of Warner Brothers in 2018 for more than $100 billion, and they now have merged that with Discovery. And seeing that being a streaming provider is a global challenge, and you need to have massive muscles to be able to do that. And Warner Brothers, together with Discovery, are still a distant number 3 on the world market. Netflix having 200-odd million subscribers, Disney having 100 million or so, and then you have Warner Brothers and Discovery, which is 60-70 million. So there are good examples, but I would also say that there are plenty of operators that say that, you know what, we are just going to focus on telecom. And why are people then trying to diversify? Well, it's A, revenue. B, it is a way of creating stickiness to our services. And C is that mobile operators traditionally tend to have a very high degree of trust within our consumers. And if we are then able to launch services such as banking, such as media, or social media for that matter, in a good way, then that stickiness becomes even better.
Спасибо большое. Ну что, вот получается...
Thank you very much. Okay, stickiness, revenues, MTS is aggressive, quite positively aggressive, building up their system, and we discussed it sometimes, but it has grown even since time. So ecosystem approach in Russia, is it good? Will everybody succeed? What do you think? Well, totally. The role of telecoms inside the systems. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see all of you, and it's great that Max already has done the job for me. Well, at least almost all of it. And I also can say that there are some successful among telecoms developing such systems, and we can see the numbers now. But the last quarter, it was digital growth. Major telecoms year by year, more than 10%. Growth. Well, and people start noticing that this surplus, two-thirds, generated not by telecoms. More than 25% of our revenues of our whole company is not telecom, and they are growing and at a different speed than the main business, the telecom. So, but more than 20% growth of retail, more than 30% of media, fintech 40%, and almost 50% the other mobile services. But stickiness, that's indeed quite a bright thing, because if a client adds only one product to the main telecom product, to have two products from ecosystem, so the churn goes down by 3 times, which is the main problem of any telecom. So that's quite a driver for growth of revenues of the telecom, and quarter by quarter we can see that it goes this way. And during pandemic, there was no quarter of decline, thanks to the fact that the clients did have a lot of different services, and they did not go away. And is there any metering metrics of, it's positive because this or that? Yes, of course, but you have to rebuild your economic models and general approach. But we stopped calculating the profitability of products. Now we are counting the economics of every client, every customer, and we can see when it gets a new product, we can see that his CAV client by client grows, and that's how we can calculate. And as I said, revenues grew by 10%, but and AIK also by the same number. So to show that it's not because we burned off the money in advertising, and that's the business growing, which is quite a serious indicator. Even the major systems did not achieve that. Well, Russia helps us, yes, because we know that we all have Google is not the leader in search. Netflix is not the leader in movies, so that's the story that helps us very much, because the market, on the one hand, is open, but on the other, it has certain laws and languages which allows the Russian companies. Okay, let's move on. We have 2 more hyping things. We can use this word, hype, which brushes both global and Russian, AI, artificial intelligence, and big data, which is spoken about much, but Vyacheslav, about Russia, and then Max, then you. So are you dealing with it? Why do you need to do it when Yandex and other guys like Mails and Google colleagues are operating well enough? Why do you need entering their territory? Well, 2 main reasons. Because no ecosystem will not operate in the future without the elements of AI. So no doubts about that. That's the famous thing. A small company coming say, you have 80+ million clients, and we will add our small business to earn huge money with you. Well, but the problem is that this capacity to drive home to the client something new about the services is very small. The more often you do it, you will be switched after spammers. So you have a very rare opportunity to get the right moment when the client is ready to do it. Without big data and AI, it doesn't work at all. And the second part of it, very important, of course, is that the speed of development of all those technologies, AI, first of all, is very high. And, I don't think that today's leaders will be the leaders of the future, because recently we've started to identify our infrastructure with cloud technology for us to faster develop the technologies of edge cloud and edge computing, which, because in the future, a big number of calculations, I'm sure, will be done, roughly speaking, in your iPad. That's why we decided to enter the startup Neuron, which do the edge chips. And by 2026, the survey says that half of the devices will have part of artificial intelligence. So that's why telecom has advantage. We can max in the world the prospects of big data and AI. How can you estimate it? What are the questions that are mostly discussed in the United States? Because there are national national developments. Well, in Russia, we are talking a lot about regulation. In the European Union and USA, I know that they are more speaking about ethics. And well, what do you think is the most important thing to discuss?
Oh, that was a lot of questions
Yeah,
at the
but
same
we're
time.
short in time.
So AI, I completely agree with you, Slava, is a key cornerstone in the future. I mean, we talk about something called intelligent connectivity. We're moving away from just connectivity, let it be 4G or 5G or 3G, but actually combining with AI, IoT, and big data. So AI is a critical component to be able to sort this massive amount of data that we all generate, that will all be connected through high-speed radio networks. And we have several examples of where AI is doing good, because this is a double-edged sword, exactly as you alluded to, that regulation needs to be developed, and it is not developed yet. We from GSMA, we have launched a couple of different guidelines on AI ethics is one, and we have another guideline on how to use AI in COVID-19, in the pandemic. But still, much more needs to be done in that department. And the way of doing it is to have discussions such as this to understand what is good AI and what is bad AI. Good AI, couple of examples. Telia in Sweden, for instance, have used AI and connectivity to see how well people have adhered to working from home and not traveling. So you can clearly see a pattern where people are, yes, they are staying at home and they're not traveling, and therefore the disease has been contained. In Brazil, Vivo, the operator Vivo, has launched air pollution measurements. So we can now, or they can, thanks to collection of data and using AI in a smart way, they can predict the weather, the pollution level up to 24, maybe even 48 hours before it actually happens. And therefore they can warn people not to go outside. Mm-hmm. So those are good examples of AI. But then you have a whole bunch of bad examples as well that we need to manage thanks to regulation and ethical behaviors from our members, from the CEOs. No doubt AI is here to stay. No doubt AI will be a critical key component in the way we go forward with telecoms.
Да, пожалуйста, коротенько только, да.
Well, I would like to add what Max said. Well, I would echo, indeed, the legislation not very ready, not only about AI, but telecoms are natural places of development, because there are a lot of others regulations that regulate us in a quite tough way. That's quite a limitation for us, and we are the safest. And people know that. They know the quality of data we have, and they treat it more calmly. And we can, well, it would be better for the state to understand the border between the state secret. Well, Max, okay, let's continue with you, Max, about 5G. Well, in a number of countries, different formats, operating in a different way. What is the effect? Any economic benefits of that? Because I don't know about the USA. I did not follow much about the 5G developments. In Russia, I think they're still fighting around economics.
Yeah, so 5G is here to stay. 5G is not a 100-meter sprint. It is going to be here for the long run. So people ask me, so are we late to the market? Well, no, you're not late to the market. I mean, things will evolve around 5G. We have, I think, around 150 different networks being launched as we speak. No doubt 5G will be a key source of capex investments. For over the coming 5 years, roughly $900 billion will be invested into radio networks. 80% of that will be towards 5G, so massive investments into 5G. 5G might be, still to be determined, but might be more useful for enterprises and less so for you and me. I mean, when I am in the UK on my 5G device, downloading a movie takes me, on 4G takes me, 40 seconds. On 5G it takes me 5 seconds. Now, will that make me choose 5G over 4G? Not really. it will be other drivers that would choose to be a 5G augmented activity. So I think 5G will be towards enterprises and industries more. And we are predicting that by 2030, this industry, the mobile industry, will generate some $700 billion from enterprise alone by 2030 per year. $700 billion per year. So it's a massive opportunity for our industry to serve a untapped market, which is industries. When it comes to IoT, low latency surveillance, fleet management, there's a whole floor of activities that you can optimize, and we can use connectivity in a good way. But that is still to come.
Спасибо, Вячеслав. У нас
Thank you very much. Russia has the third, fourth, or fifth way to go, as you know. In 5G, we have the fifth way to go. What about the frequency? What is going on? When the situation will be solved? How critical it is now? Well, 2-3 years ago, people said that, it's coming. But still, it is not yet. Well, it is coming, yes. It is going to be solved shortly. That's my short answer. The long answer is that, of course, we continue working at that, and I would say that we are closer to the situation when all industries are doing well. I don't think that we are lagging behind very much from the world. Well, it's noticeable, but not critical that's lagging behind, because Max was right saying that from the point of view of providing services today, the most modern services, and what we did in 4G, and we did a lot, and all operators did. We have the very good quality of that. So 5G will not generate any value to the people. Transfer of data, yes, it is important, and for enterprises. But there are a lot of experiments underway. We're still doing it, and important thing is that we have to do the 3.5 hertz story, because 4.9 is very expensive in Russia. And Japan can afford it with their small territory, but our capex growth by 2.5, it will do it unprofitable and too long a story. So we have to fine-tune it. Okay, let's hope that next time when we meet, you say, that's already that. So it's digital inequality. Pandemic showed how important this issue is, including Russia, where telecom, of course, we can brag about that. Everything is good with our telecom. Internet penetration is very good. Not everywhere because of the geographics. How burning is the issue in the world? I mean, regionally, distribution.
No, that's a really good question, and something that we are working quite intense with. I mean, we were the first industry back in 2016 to commit to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, so that's why I have this pin on here. But the bifurcation of people, I think, is really, really important. And today we know we are almost 8 billion people on this planet. We know that half of the world's population are connected to internet. Half, so 4 billion people. And by and large, everyone is on a mobile phone connected to internet. So that means that 4 billion people are not. They're left behind. And if we look at those 4 billion, or actually 3.8 billion, out of those 3.8 billion, 500 million, so that's 6-7%, do not have any coverage. So that we call that the coverage gap. They don't have any means of connecting to a mobile broadband network, which is 3G, 4G, or 5G. 500 million. But the vast amount, the 3.3 billion people, they live beneath a mobile broadband coverage. 3G, 4G, or 5G. I'm not counting 2G. So 3G, 4G, or 5G. 3.3 billion. So the focus must be to be able to provide services to them. So they are included in this digital economy. Because the worst thing we can do is to move ahead quickly and can become more advanced with the 4 billion and forget the other 4 billion. Because then we are lost as a human race in my world. So we really need to focus on providing good service for these 3.3 billion, which are low-hanging fruits. We've already built a network, but no one is using it. So that is a big focus from the industry, from GSMA, from all the different UN agencies that we are working with.
Спасибо большое, Вячеслав. У нас что происходит?
Thank you very much, Vyacheslav. And what happens in here, I do not like this agenda saying that Russia is lagging behind or is not lagging behind, but, I think that Russia is among leaders in this area now. But what is the situation now in our country with digital inequality? And the president also instructed the government to cover the highways with 4G because, I just went from St. Peter to Moscow and the coverage was not very well. But what about smaller settlements? So what is the coverage out there? What is your perception now? In telecom, it is a well-known fact that we are among leaders, both in coverage and in pricing. And even in 4G, we are covered for more than 80%. Of population. In 3G, it's more than 90%. So from this point of view, it's okay. But yes, there is research on various aspects. Cable Co UK says that in terms of pricing, we are number 6 from the end of the list for 1 gigabyte. The price for 1 gigabyte. 80% of population is using internet in our country. In China, it's 56%. So from this point of view, it's okay. Yes, not the whole of the country is covered because the country is very large. But you might be surprised, but we do not have this feeling that the new requirements in LTE, in coverage for highways and settlements might harm us, because simultaneously with the requirements, we also received a preliminary. I hope that we will have a full-fledged support from the state for our building capacities, construction capacities. It's not just that you put base stations, but you need electricity for stations, and we need documents and all other formalities. And the country is ready to help us in this, and we're going forward together in this area. All 4 operators are working on this together now. This is a unique initiative, and for this efforts, we will eliminate digital inequality, and we have a good chance to get even more profitable than before in this project. So we are going in this direction now. But as for sustainable development, I think that this comes to us much faster than we might think of it. And we are making a lot of efforts in this area. We were the first to support GSMA in zero emissions initiatives, and we already have one of our programs is part of the list of best practices by the United Nations. I mean, the M generation, the educational charity program, and I see the feedback from the employees. We have a lot of young employees. We are developing ourselves in IT areas, and these young people ask from the company to be responsible in these areas, and we understand that this comes in and this is a real life now, and we should move forward in this direction as well. Okay, fine. So we're pressed of time, but let's continue speaking about this. I'm happy that we touched upon sustainable development, but there is another hype story about the SG telecom sector. What tasks it is tackling in meeting the goals for sustainable development? What are the initiatives of GSMA? Vyacheslav has mentioned some. What is your perspective on this?
It's certainly a big one. And as Slava said, MTS and many other operators have been pushing us and the world to adapt a net zero approach by 2050 at the very latest, or 2030. And we have now, as an industry, been recognized this year from the United Nations as a breakthrough sector. And that is something that we're very, very proud of. So thank you, Slava, and thank you everyone else that has made that possible. It is quite impressive to see the power of the telecom industry when we put our mind to it. And another key thing is of course, no poverty, trying to lift people out of poverty. And we know through studies done by the World Bank that after 1 year of mobile broadband coverage, if you live underneath mobile broadband coverage, this might sound strange, but extreme poverty reduces with 4%. And after 2 years, 7%. So the fact that you are able to use the device and able to use the connectivity actually propels you up from extreme poverty. And I think that's a key statement. And of course, we're working, the third sector I would like to say is gender equality. Back to this, half of the world population is connected and half is not. If you look at the ones that are not, it is predominantly women that, and specifically women in low and middle income countries that are suffering tremendously. But they are also the solution. So if we can if we can attract them and make sure that they have a device, have a real reason to go on internet, I think a lot of the battle will be solved. So gender equality, climate, and no poverty, I would say, are the three biggest ones.
Спасибо большое. Я надеюсь, организаторы конференции нас простят.
Okay, thank you very much. I was very surprised that it's 30 years this year that the first GSM call was made. I do not know why it is not celebrated outside of the industry. I think this is a technological breakthrough at that point of time, and this was a very important event indeed. So 30 years passed. Max, I understand that it's hard to compare today's telecom operators with those operating 30 years ago. It's like you just compare a high-speed train with a horse carriage. But these 30 years, how could you describe the breakthrough that we witnessed? And Vyacheslav, a couple of words from you. The Russian industry, Russian telecom, Russian operators, over these 30 years, did we have our own way? And what will happen in the next 30 years? Mass, please.
Ago, the GSM standard was developed, and the 13 CEOs of then the PTTs, the state-owned telecom operators, they estimated that if we're lucky, we will have 10% penetration. 10% of the world's population will be able to use a mobile phone. And we know that was a very conservative estimate. Today it's 5.2 billion people, so almost 70% of the world's population have a mobile phone. So, it's impossible, but I agree with you. It's a fantastic industry that has created so much wealth, so much joy in such a short period of time. And I think what Slava and other really, really good operators are doing are leading the way. We have Etisalat sitting over there as well, who is going to, I'm sure, amaze us with a lot of really cool new stuff. This industry never stops innovating. We're always believing in the future. We're investing heavily, and we're pretty bold in taking those decisions on investing into the future that we don't know what's going to happen with, but we are convinced it's going to be something great.
Спасибо, Мац. Вячеслав, российская.
Thank you very much, Mats. So Russia's industry is the most innovative, isn't it? Indeed, we have our own way, as you properly put it. In Europe, for instance, yes, people had communications, not mobile communications, but people had an opportunity to call each other. In Russia, it was easier to walk to the place of the person you want to talk to and talk to him. And people, were queuing to make phone calls. So we offered the communication for many people in Russia, and yes, we had our own unique way, but everything has changed over these 30 years, because I remember at that point of time, I remember in the 90s, for a period of time I had this large phone that costed more than a car I drove at that point of time, and this was a completely different story, completely different situation, but now we cannot live without our smartphones, and this is a basis of our economy now. But after 30 years, I mentioned AI and chips that will go into all devices in the future. We all expect that artificial intelligence will change a lot of industries, starting the most important ones, medicine and education and others. This will happen definitely. And all these things can only work with communication in place. And if now we just cannot think of our lives without such devices, but in the future life will stop without all these devices, and communication means, well, we hope that industries, your industry and adjacent industries, will give us those great impressions. I remember my first phone call I made. It was great. So I hope that in the future we'll have even more. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your interview. Please take your seats. Let's move on. Let's applaud, gentlemen.